Guillaume de Machaut was a medieval French poet and composer. He is one of the earliest composers on whom significant biographical information is available. According to Daniel Leech-Wilkinson, Machaut was the last great poet who was also a composer. Well into the 15th century, Machaut's poetry was greatly admired and imitated by other poets, including Geoffrey Chaucer. Machaut composed in a wide range of styles and forms. He is a part of the musical movement known as the Ars Nova. Machaut helped develop the motet and secular song forms. Machaut read the Messe de Nostedame, the earliest known complete setting of the ordinary of the Mass attributable to a single composer. Life. Guillaume de Machaut was born about 1300, and educated in the region around Reims. His surname most likely derives from the nearby town of Machaut, 30 kilometers northeast of Reims in the Ardennes region. He was employed as secretary to John I, Count of Luxembourg and King of Bohemia from 1323 to 1346, and also became a canon. He often accompanied King John on his various trips, many of them military expeditions around Europe. He was named the Canon of Verdun in 1330, Arras in 1332, and Reims in 1337. By 1340, Machaut was living in Reims, having relinquished his other canonic posts at the request of Pope Benedict XII. In 1346, King John was killed fighting at the Battle of Crèvecoeur, and Machaut, who was famous and much in demand, entered the service of various other aristocrats and rulers, including King John's daughter Bonne, her sons Jean de Berry and Charles, and others such as Charles II of Navarre. Machaut survived the Black Death that devastated Europe, and spent his later years living in Reims composing and supervising the creation of his complete works manuscripts. His poem La Voix d'It purports to recount a late love affair with a 19-year-old girl, Perron d'Armentières, although the accuracy of the work as autobiography is contested. When he died in 1377, other composers such as François-André wrote elegies lamenting his death. Poetry. Guillaume de Machaut's lyric output comprises around 400 poems, including 235 ballades, 76 rondeaux, 39 violet, 24 lay, 10 complaintes, and 7 chansons royales, and Machaut did much to perfect and codify these fixed forms. Some of his lyric output is embedded in his narrative poems or dits, such as La Remède de Fortune, which includes one of each genre of lyric poetry, and La Voix d'It, but most are included in a separate, unordered section entitled Les Longes des Dames. That the majority of his lyrics are not set to music suggests that he normally wrote the text before setting some to music. Other than his Latin motets of a religious nature and some poems invoking the horrors of war and captivity, the vast majority of Machaut's lyric poems reflect the conventions of courtly love, and involve statements of service to a lady and the poet's pleasure and pains. In technical terms, Machaut was a master of elaborate rhyme schemes, and this concern makes him a precursor to the grand rhétoricians of the 15th century. Guillaume de Machaut's narrative output is dominated by the dit. These first-person narrative poems follow many of the conventions of the Roman de la Rose, including the use of allegorical dreams, allegorical characters, and the situation of the narrator-lover attempting to return toward or satisfy his lady. Machaut is also the author of a poetic chronicle of the chivalric deeds of Peter I of Cyprus, and of poetic works of consolation and moral philosophy. His unusual self-reflective usage image of himself as the narrator of his dits gleans some personal philosophical insights as well. At the end of his life, Machaut wrote a poetic treatise on his craft. This reflects on his conception of the organization of poetry into set genres and rhyme schemes, and the ordering of these genres into distinct sections of manuscripts. This preoccupation with ordering his oeuvre is reflected in an index to MSA entitled Vesky l'ordonnance Guillaume de Machaut venant Qu'il 8 and son livre. Machaut's poetry had a direct effect on the works of Eustache de Champ, Jean Froissart, Christine de Pizan, René d'Anjou and Geoffrey Chaucer, among many others. Example: the poem below, Puis qu'un oubli, is his 18th rondo. Principal works: La Remède de Fortune. The narrator is asked by his lady if the poem she has found is by him. The narrator flees from her and comes to a garden where Hope consoles him and teaches him how to be a good lover. He returns to his lady. Jugement du roi de Behind. The narrator hears a debate between a lady and a knight, in order to proclaim one or the other the most unhappy. The narrator seeks out the advice of the King of Bohemia, who consults allegories, and the unhappy knight is declared the winner. De du Lion. The narrator comes to a magical island and a lion guides him to a beautiful lady. An old knight comes to the narrator and reveals the meaning of what he sees and gives him advice for being a better lover. De la Larian aka Dic des Quatre Oiseaux, who a symbolic tale of love. The narrator raises 4 different birds, but each one flees him. One day the second bird comes back to him. Jugement du roi de Navarre. Following up on the Jugement du roi de Behind, a lady blames the narrator for awarding the prize to the knight. The King of Navarre is consulted and condemns the poet. Comfort d'Army, dedicated to Charles II of Navarre. This poetic consolation gives biblical and classical examples of fortitude. De La Fontaine amoureuse aka Livre de Morpheus. The narrator meets a hopeless lover who must separate from his lady. The two men come to a magical fountain and fall asleep, and in a dream the lady consoles her lover. La Voix did, often seen as Machaut's masterpiece, this poem is an early example of metafiction, and tells of the sadness and separation of the narrator from his lady, and of the false rumors that are spread about him. The narrative is stuffed with prose letters and lyric poems that the narrator claims were in truth exchanged by the unhappy lovers and put in the book at the behest of his lady. The work is, however, highly satirical, and mocks the conventional paradigm of medieval courtly literature by presenting himself as an old, ill, impotent poet who becomes the lover of a young and beautiful maiden, who falls in love with him from his reputation as a poet alone. Though the work is called the Voix dit, a true story, Machaut includes many inconsistencies which force the reader to question the truthfulness of his story. Prologue. Written at the end of his life as a preface to his collected works, this allegory describes Machaut's principles of poetry, music and rhetoric, as imparted to him by nature and love. Prized Alexandrie. Poetic retelling of the exploits of Peter of Lusignan, king of Jerusalem and of Cyprus. Music. As a composer of the 14th century, Machaut's secular song output includes monophonic lay and violay, which continue, in updated forms, some of the tradition of the troubadours. He also worked in the polyphonic forms of the ballad and rondo, and wrote the first complete setting of the ordinary of the Mass, which can be attributed to a single composer. Secular music. The lyrics of Machaut's works almost always dealt with courtly love. A few works exist to commemorate a particular event, such as M18, Bone Pastor, Bone Pastor, Bone Pastor. Machaut mostly composed in 5 genres: the lie, the violai, the motet, the ballad, and the rondo. In these genres, Machaut retained the basic forms fixes but often utilized creative text setting and cadences. For example, most rondo phrases end with a long melisma on the penultimate syllable. However, a few of Machaut's rondo, such as R18, Puik Uuen Oubli, are mostly syllabic in treatment. Machaut's motets often contain sacred texts in the tenor, such as in M12 chord Mesto cantando Hellas. Pourquoi virent libera me. The top 2 voices in these 3-part compositions, in contrast, sing secular French texts, creating interesting concordances between the sacred and secular. In his other genres, though, he does not utilize sacred texts. Sacred music. Machaut's cyclic setting of the Mass, identified in one source as the Messa de Nostre Dame, was composed in the early 1360s, probably for Reims Cathedral. While not the first cyclic Mass, the Tournai Mass is earlier. It was the first by a single composer and conceived as a unit. Machaut probably was familiar with the Tournai Mass since Machaut's Mass shares many stylistic features with it, including textless interludes. Whether or not Machaut's Mass is indeed cyclic is contested. After lengthy debate, musicologists are still deeply divided. However, there is a consensus that this Mass is at best a forerunner to the later 15th century cyclic Masses by the likes of Josquin des Prez. Machaut's Mass differs from these in the following ways. He does not hold a tonal center throughout the entire work. As the Mass uses 2 distinct modes, there is no extended melodic theme that clearly runs through all the movements, and the Mass does not use the parody technique. There is considerable evidence that this Mass was not composed in one creative motion. That the movements may have been placed together does not mean they were conceived so. Nevertheless, the Mass can be said to be stylistically consistent, and certainly the chosen chants are all celebrations of Mary, the mother of Jesus. Also adding weight to the claim that the Mass is cyclic is the possibility that the piece was written or assembled for performance at a specific celebration. The possibility that it was for the coronation of Charles V, which was once widely accepted, is thought unlikely in modern scholarship. The composer's intention that the piece be performed as one entire Mass setting makes the Messa de Nostre Dame generally considered a cyclic composition. Recordings. 1936. Guillaume de Machaut. Messa de Notre Dame, Dite du Sacre de Charles V, Les Paraphonistes de Saint-Jean des Matins, Guillaume de Van, dir. Standard groove recording, 2 discs, 78 revolutions per minute, 12 in. Monaural. Anthologie sonore 31, as 74, as 75, as 76, as 77, L'Anthologie sonore. 1938. Guillaume de Machaut. Hocatus David, Jean Arcambault, André Lafosse 2 disc, Guillaume de Van, dir. Standard groove recording, 1 disc, 78 revolutions per minute, 12 in. Monaural. Editions de l'Oiseau Lyell 3, 1059, M6-91643, 1063. M6-91647, Editions de l'Oiseau Lyre. 1938. Guillaume de Machaut. Anthesius Je puis trop bien, de Tatsuisi Conforte. Henriette Germont, soprano, La Société Pro Musica Antique de Brussels, Safford Cape, director. Standard groove recording, 1 disc, 78 revolutions per minute, 12 in. Monaural. L'Anthologie sonore. 1938. 1943. Guillaume de Machaut. Siege super, douce Dame Jolie, He. Dame de Valence, Pierre de Nier's tenor instrumental accompaniment. Standard groove recording, 1 disc, 78 revolutions per minute, 10 in. Monaural. Lumen XC462, XC463, 33405, France. Lumen, Guillaume de Machaut. Roselis, Anon, a l'éclaté, Anon, Hui main, Anon, Amour que vous ai fait, Anon. Trop penso, Simone Gobelin, voice H. Coca, clarinet G. Bon, flute P. Hongya, bassoon. Standard groove recording, 1 disc, 78 revolutions per minute, 312 in. Monaural, 44 Bosnia and Herzegovina convertible Marx Boit Musique, 1948. 1956 Guillaume de Machaut. Messe de Notre-Dame, died du Sacre de Charles V. Gina Combo, soprano Pierre Denaire, haute contre Georges Cathalat, tenor Eugène Bousquet, baritone Marcel Vigneron, bass l'ensemble vocal air instrumental Roger Blanchard, dir. LP recording, 1 disc, 33 revolutions per minute. 10 in. Monaural. Ducretet Thomson 270C085, Ducretet Thomson, 1973, Machaut Chansons, V1 and V2, Studio der Frühen Musik, Emmy, 1983, Machaut, The Mirror of Narcissus, Gothic Voices, Hyperion CDA 66087. 1989 Machaut, Messe de Notre-Dame, The Hilliard Ensemble, 1994 Remede de Fortune, Ensemble Project Ars Nova, New Albion Records, 1997 Dreams in the Pleasure Garden, Machaut Chansons, Orlando Consort, Deutsche Grammophon DG Archive 4776731. 1997 Kyrie 2 and 3, on Kronos Quartet Early Music, 2002 Les Motets, Ensemble Musica Nova, Lucien Candle, Zigzag Territoires 021002.2, 2003 Unrequited Music of Guillaume de Machaut, Liber Unusualis, 2004 Machaut, Motets, The Hilliard Ensemble, 2004 Marfinest Mon Commencement by Louis Theory, Fortis Records, 2009 Ballades, Ensemble Musica Nova, Lucien Candle, on AECD 0982. 2010 Art of Love, Music of Machaut, Robert Satan, Edge Records, with Mark Feldman, Hassan Hagmoon, John Ellis, Lionel Luegi, Brad Meldai, Milton Nascimento. 2010 Messe Notre Dame, Ensemble Musica Nova, Lucien Candle, on AECD 1093. 2011 Sacred and Secular Music, Messe de Notre Dame, Brilliant Classics 94217. 2013 Machaut Monchant Vous Envoy, Various Artists, Eloquenter Records EL1342.